Hey guys, Naz here. Today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to use Photoshop to help with the patterning process. And this tutorial won't be a how to use Photoshop for beginners. I'm going to assume that everyone watching this tutorial who wants to use it will have some idea of how to use Photoshop. There's a lot of tutorials out there if you've never used it before. It's pretty easy. And this will also not be a tutorial on how to pattern a certain character. This is just how to use Photoshop to your benefit when you are patterning. I'll always do my patterning digitally, or at least 99% of the time. I just find it a lot easier. I trust the pen tool a lot more than freehanding, and it just has so many benefits, mainly being able to trace profile views of characters and all that sort of thing. So usually when I want to start patterning a character, I'm going to bring in a picture of them. Most of the time it's best to have one that is a straight profile of the character, but I just brought this one in for example because I'd been working on this when I was patterning Ember. So what we're going to do first is we want to scale our reference image to the size, roughly the size we want our plush to come out. So what you're going to do is you're going to go View and Rulers. And this is going to bring up your rulers vertically and horizontally, and choose what you want to work in. I usually work in inches. So, and I've opened up a file that's about an A4 piece of paper size, and that's about 11 inches tall. So let's say we want Ember to be 15 inches tall. We're going to scale up our file, and we're going to, I just use the crop tool to extend. By the way, I'm using Photoshop Creative Cloud, which is the latest version of Photoshop, but you can pretty much do everything I'm doing here in previous versions. It'll just look a little bit different. So now that we've scaled our file, or our, what would you call it? Canvas, that's the word. We're going to scale Ember, and we want to make her, so you can see here at the top of her head is where this 0 is over here, and she's about 16 or 15 and a half inches tall now, and this is to scale. So this file is about 16 inches high. So if we printed it out, it would be to scale. So usually when I'm patterning a character, you want to account for the fact that with patterning, nothing's going to turn out as big as the flat piece of paper pattern. So usually I will make her, or I would make the character to scale maybe a couple of inches taller than I want it to turn out, just to account for all that wrapping around and that shrinkage that's going to occur when you stuff the character. So now that we've got them to scale, what I'll usually do is I've obviously got them on a new layer, and I'll just reduce the opacity, and then I would go in, and if I was working on Ember's body, for example, I would use the pen tool. I use the pen tool most of the time instead of using the brush tool, just because the pen is going to produce much more smooth lines. Yeah, I trust it a lot more than my shaky hand sort of when I'm drawing. So say we wanted to pattern her body, I'll just cut her tail off. But you can very easily trace the character and make a new layer. And there you have that exact shape of that character. You'll obviously have to go through and tweak it. You might need to make it a little bit wider or taller, or put darts in, or whatever you want to do, but that's up to you. So this is really handy, especially when you're tracing the head shape in a portrait sort of scenario. But the pen tool is definitely fantastic. I mean, if you don't know how to use it, there's lots of tutorials out there on how to use the pen tool, and just make sure that it's set on path instead of shape. Another thing that you can do is, if I'm wanting to pattern something, say I want to give her, I don't have a profile image to work off, and I want to give her a round head base, and then I'll manually go in and draw her snout. You can go into shapes and you can select circle, and a lot of the time you can put a circle in to have a perfectly round sphere to pattern off of. and we could go and make a new layer and then go and draw in her muzzle and then use that circle as a guide. You can see why I don't use the brush tool because I'm really messy. So anyway, that's just another tip. So you can also, when you're using, say we are using the brush, occasionally I will use it, you can hold down shift and it will give you perfectly horizontal or vertical lines. Another thing you can do is once you've scaled your character to the size you want, you can go in and make reference lines to the proportions. So we can see here that, you know, her body is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, roughly about 6 inches. Her head's about 3 inches. So then we can convert that to real life scale and use that as sort of a guide for how large things should be so they stay proportional to each other. Another thing that you can do instead of doing that is, once you've actually made your plush, let's say that this was a work in progress image. Image. We could go in and sort of overlay our character onto, so the vector reference image or whatever you're using as a base. And you just need to reduce the opacity. You can also put it on multiply, whatever makes it easier for you to see. And you can sort of line them up and make sure that things like your eyes are placed correctly or your spikes are placed correctly, that sort of thing. It's just a really good checker, because as much as you can judge whether something is in the right position just by looking at it, the computer will really tell you, you know, if you're going for really high accuracy, it'll tell you what's wrong with your plush if that's what you're aiming for. So another thing that is handy is, let's say we were, let's see how far I can go back. Will it let me go back far enough? Yes. Okay, let's say that this piece is the side piece for our body pattern, and we want to make a gusset that goes from here to here. Instead of going and manually doing it, printing this out and manually calculating your gusset, one way to get an approximation of how long your gusset should be is this. So I'm going to draw a straight line and just going to approximate, and this is just a total guess, how long that gusset should be. And what we can do is use the move tool, and we're going to select this line, that this is the length that I'm guessing the gusset should be. It's probably going to need to be longer. Anyway, what we can do is we can line the top of our gusset with where we want the gusset to start. And see here, this little thing, you can grab it and move it around, and it is your center of rotation for whatever you're moving. So if I want to, you can also use your keys to move it into the exact spot. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to place it where the intersection of the gusset line and the side piece line is, and you can see it rotates from that point. And if we just keep creeping down, following that line, we will eventually work out approximately how long our gusset needs to be. If I've guessed right, I'm gonna laugh at myself. That's a pretty, oh, I shouldn't swear. That's a very good guess. So you can see that my guess was pretty much right, but if it had been too long or too short, then you can adjust it. This isn't going to give you the exact length, but it's a really good sort of guesstimation way to go, and you can go in and sort of make your gusset however you want it to be. And that's just a really quick way to guess if you have no idea where to start. What else? Another thing you can use Photoshop for is for placing, finding the placement for your embroidery. So what I always do is, when I have embroidery that I have to work out where it's going to go on a head or something like that, I will do a full test of that head, and I will draw on where I want the embroidery to go. Then I will unstuff and unpick, and then I will scan the pieces back in. So you can see here, this is a scan of this muzzle area, this muzzle piece that has had where I want the embroidery to go drawn onto it. And I'll bring it back into Photoshop. This is my plush trap head pattern that I've been working on, and I will just put it, either make the opacity low or put it underneath the layer of the actual digitized pattern piece. Line it up, and then you can go in and find that pattern piece, and you can actually go and manually draw in where that embroidery should go, and you can use that for both digitizing and aligning your embroidery, aligning your embroidery with your pattern piece when you do want to trace it out in real life. Another thing you can do in Photoshop, and I've done a video on this before, is you can make vectors to use for your embroidery digitizing. And I have a basic pony base that I've modified about 50,000 times. So you can see here I've modified this one to use as a rose-like eye, and all of these are shapes. So to make a shape, you just use your pen tool, and instead of path you go on shape, and you can go in and make your vector shapes, and they'll be infinitely scalable, nice and clean, so you can scale them to whatever size you want your plush to be. And that's just a really handy thing to do. So if you want to learn how to make one of these specifically for a pony eye, you can go back and watch that old tutorial of mine. But that's just another handy thing. I'll show you guys another one that I made recently. This is me using references to make my ember eye for my embroidery. Please don't trace over mine, make your own, make it a little bit different, but yeah, that's another cool thing that you can do. Get rid of that. And one last thing that I'll go over is how to print patterns that are too large to print on your standard piece of paper. And this happens pretty much all the time because I prefer to work on a larger scale. If you work on a smaller scale, it probably won't matter that much, but anyway, I'm pretty sure that this headpiece here is just about the size you would need to print it out on an A4 piece of paper, which is what we print out on here in Australia. I'm not sure what you guys overseas will print on, but you can see that that fits just enough for me to print it and it not be chopped off. But let's say that it was a bigger piece. So I'll just go in and I'll scale it up. Now this pattern piece is going to be too large to print. So what do? I just do this all the time. I know there's probably other easier methods depending on what program you're used to using, but I always use Photoshop. So what I do is pretty much just I make a jigsaw piece for my old jigsaw puzzle for myself. So I get the piece that I want to print, and in this case I can guess that I pretty much just need to divide it in half. So what I can do is if I have lots of pieces, let's say it was something like this, it was a huge piece, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I would keep this image so that when I did print them out, I could say, okay, piece number 1 goes up the top, piece number 2 goes next to it, piece number 3 goes under 1, and blah 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 blah, just to give yourself a guide. But in this case, we probably only need to put in 2 pieces. If you want to put some little markers, so when you print it out you can line it back up again, you can do that. In this case you probably wouldn't need to, but if your pattern was a bit more complicated you could. So what I would do is I would use that, you could either, you could manually go in and just select one side, copy and paste it and print it, and then select the other side, copy, paste and print, or you can just go paste the whole piece, align it so that this piece is within your printing boundary, print it, then move it over, print this side, and then all you're going to do is you'll have both pieces on your piece of paper. You're going to cut away all the excess and you're just going to stick them together at this seam with some sticky tape, and that's what I do all the time. So that's how I print larger pattern pieces, even with giant things like I've had to print Celestia's mane and tail, which are, you know, the size of a table. They're absolutely huge, but you're really just, you know, just make sure that you don't confuse yourself. Always label them if you've got a lot of pieces. Another thing you can do is you can put some arrows to show, you know, the direction of the nap, so I don't get confused and think, oh, is this meant to go this way or is it meant to go that way? No, all the pieces have the arrows going the same way, so you know what orientation they need to be for you to stick them together. And that's pretty much it. So I'm more than happy to do more Photoshop tutorials, but those are just some basic ways that I use Photoshop to help me pattern things. It's definitely handy having things digitally because you can easily make changes rather than having to redraw your whole pattern every single time. You can go in and just, you know, we can say that we need to make the nose pointier or something, and it's just a matter of drawing that in. Which is really quick to do. Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention. Say that we were making a gusset or something, anything that we wanted to be symmetrical. Let's just say this is our gusset. And you can see that I have, in my masterful glory, failed to draw this side. Let's say this side of our gusset looks really good and this side looks really bad for whatever reason. We're just not good at drawing gussets. So if one side of a pattern looks really good and it's mirrored, what I usually do is I split it down the middle, and I'm going to get rid of the bad side. And then I'll make a copy. And then what I do is I go edit, transform, flip horizontal, or whatever way you need to flip it, and then rejoin them at the seam and merge. And now I have my theoretical gusset that has a beautiful taper on each side that's perfectly symmetrical. I found that back when I used to use the brush tool a lot more, I used to get wonky gussets, but I find if you use the pen tool and this method of dividing it in half and then mirroring, you're going to get a pretty symmetrical, nice looking gusset, and you can do that with any sort of mirrored pattern piece that you're working on. But anyway, I hope that helps you guys with some ideas for how Photoshop can help you pattern. If you have any questions, send them to me on Patreon. I'd love to make another video if you guys have any suggestions about Photoshop. I definitely want to make more videos on patterning certain elements, certain characters or certain shapes. Obviously they can't be too detailed. I'm not going to go and make a fully realized pattern, but just to give ideas on how certain shapes are made. So if you have any ideas, shoot me a message, and I'd definitely love to make a video. This video is for my Patreon supporters only. I really appreciate your guys' support. It's really awesome. If you have any ideas for any other videos, feel free to suggest them. And I hope you found this helpful. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you in the next one.